acquisition of, now there's some question as to whether, but they're actually doing that there. They're not, it's scary when they try to get to that granular level of control, when it was perfectly good for a lot of years. Now, people would complain difference, but with Roe, we had a kind of a semi-certainty of access to abortion, at least in the first trimester. And so I think a lot of people are very comfortable with that. And that's, I think, is going to be one of the major issues in this election. And for Trump to sit there and say, everybody wanted it overruled, everybody wanted it, it's like, no, we didn't.
And you know what? That's going
to, that was not everybody. It's going
to be, and it's going to be the same talking points. You know, when the court decision came out with same-sex marriage, legalizing it nationwide, there are states on the books where there are laws, like in California, where there is a trigger law that will go into effect where gay marriage will become illegal. On the ballot this year, as you know, we have, Proposition 3, which is, the Marriage Freedom Act. And those types of things, people, like you said, there was this sense of complacency with Roe being in place and us not thinking about these trigger laws from the early 1900s. We're in the exact same place again. And, there's so many things that were left up to the states only for a future administration to undo completely,
And one of the things that I think that is kind of a reality is there may be a lot of Republican women who say that they were opposed to abortion, but they were opposed to it knowing that Roe was there to give that protection to people. And so they could talk loudly. But I think when they get into the ballot box, and we have a constitutional amendment, we actually have 2 constitutional amendments on abortion before the voters this fall, most likely. I don't think they've been fully certified yet, but one of them is like the Mother and Baby Protection Act or something, some weird thing like that, and it sets abortion at 12 weeks, which is what the current law is in Nebraska after they changed it from I think it was a 20-week procedure the last legislative session. But we have 2 of them, and so one of them, and this is where I guess the Republicans are starting to get smart and realize they lose on these constitutional amendments for abortion when they're on the ballot. So they decided to create one also that makes it a 12-week ban, but it also continues to give the legislature to make even further restrictions. So it's not really a constitutional protection, because the legislature can go in and say 0 weeks. There is you may not get an abortion for any reason. In Nebraska, they would have that. Other is a constitutional amendment, which would be the functional equivalent of Roe, so I was been gathering signatures for that, and it's going to be on the ballot. And I think that is something that, when those Republican women get in there and they think about being raped by their husband, getting pregnant, and wanting a divorce, and not wanting to carry a child, or their daughter or their sister or their cousin, and what would it be like to go through that? I think a lot of them, with their conscience, is like, look, I may not do it, but I don't think we should prevent somebody who's in that position from it. I think it's going to be passed without a problem, and as we've seen it in Ohio, we saw it in Kansas.
So I think also too, not only was there this kind of like complacency with Roe being in place, but also too, there's a lack of stories then about people being victimized by a lack of care. So when Roe is in place, you're not having as many of these stories come to the forefront on how a ban actually is affecting somebody, much like for a long period of time, trans people lived relatively unmolested by the federal government up until all of a sudden the last 3 years, where we just have this dearth of state legislatures trying to restrict gender affirming care, restrict bathrooms, restrict everything under the sun. But then what that does is it also creates people like me that want to come out and actually tell their story and tell it loudly and tell it to a lot of people. And then people start to get to know the person behind the word trans, right? The person behind the word abortion.
Yeah.
And those stories start to propagate through the public. They're featured on stage at the DNC. Everybody listening to that story tonight of that poor young lady who had to go through that with her, I think it was her stepfather or uncle or something, but like these stories are now being told. And so I think that woman in Nebraska, as she is going to the ballot box, if she did get an opportunity to listen to that story, you know, that's going to be something that's going to be weighing on her very heavily as she's casting that ballot.
And that's another reason why I say I don't think the Republicans realize what's going to hit them, because they don't realize how off their mission. They've gone so radical that they're losing folks.
Yeah, no, agreed. Well, then after that, I said it was building up to a crescendo, but I might have lied, because after that, and maybe this is an unpopular opinion, maybe it's just me, but I'm really glad that we chose Tim Walz as the running mate, because then Andy Beshear got up. And look, Andy Beshear is an amazing politician. What he's been able to do in Kentucky as a Democrat, right? I mean, like, that's amazing. That is absolutely amazing. And he deserves all the credit for that. But I mean, he's not getting me fired up. He's not getting me fired up in his Oxford blue shirt and his khakis and coming out here and just, you know, doing his thing. He tried his best, I think. But like, personally, I think it was maybe we should have put him in the beginning, you know, as the crescendo was a little bit lower. Is this a popular opinion, unpopular opinion? What'd you think of Andy's speech?
I thought it was fantastic, and the energy level.
Okay. You know what? It's hard to follow Jasmine. It really was. I'm sorry. You know,
it's there are, and I think Shapiro had spoken even earlier also. So we had the people who had been in the mix, and I think pretty much everyone there is very, very happy with Coach Walz being on the ticket. It is like
it really is,
happen. You know, it and the messaging that they get and what they're doing. To me, it just is. When America gets to see this, they're going to realize, we don't want Donald.
Oh, absolutely.